So today we are going to know about all the locomotive in the Indian Railways. The Indian locomotive class Wam4 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in the 1970 by Chittaranjan Locomotive Works for Indian Railways. The model name stands for broad gauge W alternating current A mixed traffic M engine, 4th generation 4. They entered service in March 1971. A total of 500 Wam4 were built at CLW between 1970 and 1983, which made them the most numerous class of mainline electric locomotive till its successor the Wag5. Next is the Indian locomotive class Wap1 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in 1978 by Chittaranjan Locomotive Works for Indian Railways. The model name stands for broad gauge W AC current A passenger traffic P engine, 1st generation 1. They entered service in late 1979. A total of 65 Wap1 were built at CLW between 1979 and 1996, which made them the most numerous class of mainline electric passenger locomotive until its successor, the Wap4. The Indian locomotive class Wap3 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was designed by Research Design and Standards Organization (RDSO) and Chittaranjan Locomotive Works (CLW) for Indian Railways in 1987. The model name stands for broad gauge W AC current A mixed traffic M engine, 3rd generation 3. They entered service in 1988. They are the faster variant of the previous Wap1 class. The Indian locomotive class Wap4 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in 1993 by Chittaranjan Locomotive Works for Indian Railways. The model name stands for broad gauge W AC current A passenger traffic P engine, 4th generation 4. They entered service in late 1994. A total of 773 Wap4 were built at CLW between 1993 and 2015, which made them the most numerous class of mainline electric passenger locomotive until the Wap7. The locomotive was developed after its predecessor, the Wap1, was found inadequate to haul the longer, heavier express trains 24 to 26 coaches that were becoming the mainstay of the Indian Railways network. The Indian locomotive class Wap5 is the name of a class of high-speed electric locomotives produced and used by Indian Railways. The first 10 locomotives were imported from AB in Switzerland in 1995. They are supposed to be a variant of the Swiss Lok 2000 design concept, and German DB Class 120 mechanical chassis. The Indian locomotive class Wap7 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in 1999 by Chittaranjan Locomotive Works (CLW) for Indian Railways. The model name stands for broad gauge W AC current A passenger traffic P engine, 7th generation 7. They entered service in 2000. A total of 1423 Wap7 have been built, with more units being built at CLW, Benares Locomotive Works (BLW), and Diesel Loco Modernization Works (DLMW). The Indian locomotive class Wag5 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in 1978 by Chittaranjan Locomotive Works for Indian Railways. The model name stands for broad gauge W alternating current A goods traffic G engine, 5th generation 5. They entered service in 1980. A total of 1196 Wag5 were built at CLW and BHEL between 1978 and 1998, which made them the most numerous class of mainline electric locomotive till its successor the Wag7. The Indian locomotive class Wag6A is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in the 1988 by Allmänna Svenska Elektriska Aktiebolaget (ASEA) for Indian Railways. The model name stands for broad gauge W AC current A goods G engine, 6th generation, 6th first variant, A. They entered service in 1988. A total of 6 Wag6A were built at Azia, Sweden between 1987 and 1988. They were the most powerful locomotives in India until the arrival of the Wag9 class. The Indian locomotive class Wag6B is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in the 1988 by Hitachi for Indian Railways. The model name stands for Broad Gauge W AC Current A Goods G Engine, 6th generation, 6th second, 3rd variant B C. They entered service in 1988. A total of 12 Wag6, 6B variant and 6C variant were built at Hitachi, Japan between 1987 and 1988. They along with Wag6A were the most powerful locomotives in India until the arrival of the Wag9 class. The Indian locomotive class Wag7 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in the 1990 by Chittaranjan Locomotive Works for Indian Railways. The model name stands for Broad Gauge W Alternating Current A Goods Traffic G Engine, 7th generation, 7. They entered service in 1992. A total of 1970 Wag7 were built at CLW and BHEL between 1990 and 2015. Which made them the most numerous class of mainline electric locomotive till its successor the Wag9. The Indian locomotive class Wag9 is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in 1995 by AB Group, AB, for Indian Railways. The model name stands for Broad Gauge W AC Current A Goods Traffic G 9th generation 9 locomotive. They entered service in 1996. A total of 2,839 Wag9 have been built at Chittaranjan Locomotive Works CLW, with more units being built at Benares Locomotive Works BLW, Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited BHEL, and Diesel Loco Modernization Works DLMW. It was the most powerful freight locomotive of its fleet until the formal induction of the Wag12. The Wag6C3, also known as Wag10, is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotive rebuilt by Benares Locomotive Works BLW. It can deliver 10,000 horsepower, 7.457 kilowatts. The locomotive was rebuilt from a WDG3A diesel locomotive. The name stands for Broad Gauge W Alternating Current A Goods Service G Converted C. The Indian locomotive class Wag11 is a class of twin-section 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in 2018 by Benares Locomotive Works BLW, Varanasi for Indian Railways. The model name stands for Broad Gauge W Alternating Current A Goods Traffic G and 11th in series 11. They entered trial service in 2019. A total of 4 Wag11 pairs have been built by Benares Locomotive Works BLW, Varanasi. The Indian locomotive class Wag12B is a class of 25 kV AC electric locomotives that was developed in 2017 by Alstom with technological collaboration with Indian Railways. The model name stands for Broad Gauge W Alternating Current AC Goods Traffic G Locomotive, 12,000 horsepower, 12. They entered trial service in 2019. A total of 177 Wag12B have been built at Electric Locomotive Factory, Madhepura, Bihar, India. WCAM2 is a class of locomotives used in the Indian Railways system. They are the second locomotive from the WCAM class. The model name stands for Broad Gauge W DC Current C AC Current A Mixed Traffic M Locomotive, 2nd generation 2. They use the same motors as WCAM1 but with different circuitry and gearing. They are operational in routes around Mumbai. New operation was possible with 3 units. WCAM2P was the passenger-oriented version of the WCAM2 class. However, they perform better than the WCAM1 series. Same as WCAM1 class, they also performed poorly in DC mode compared to AC mode. They were also used for hauling trains away from the DC section of suburban trains to AC section and performed the same task as the WCAM1 did. WCAM2 locos had the same traction motors as the WCAM1 locos, but different circuitry and gearing. The bogies are somewhat different from those of the WCAM1, being fabricated trimount Coco bogies with secondary suspension. Rated speed 105 km per hour in DC mode and 120 km per hour in AC mode. In trials by RDSO, the loco is said to have been run at speeds up to 135 km per hour in AC mode. Almost all of these were dual-braked, but all are now equipped with air brakes only. All the WCAM1s and -2s were homed at Valsad Shed in Gujarat. Many of CR's WCAM2 locos were not used much in DC zones. Exceptions were the CR Bombay Port Trust's Wadala marshalling yard, a portion of which has DC traction, and for hauling the Punjab Mail in the late 1990s, as they delivered very poor performance in DC mode and on CR's heavy grades. Although these locos have the same traction motors as the Wam4 and WCAM1, the power output from the WCAM2 locos is higher than for the Wam4 and WCAM1 because in those models the traction motors were underfed 3,460 kVA transformer in contrast to the 5,400 kVA transformer for WCAM2, and did not yield their potential maximum power. Under AC traction, the WCAM2 locos operate with all 6 motors in parallel. This has been enforced by modifications to these locos, while in DC mode they also operate in the all-series and series parallel 2S3P, i.e., 3 series pairs of motors in parallel configurations. Recent WCAM2s from BHEL, including the passenger-specific version WCAM2P, were rated 2,900 horsepower in DC mode and 4,700 horsepower in AC mode max. Speed 120 km per hour in AC mode. These were used by WR and CR for fast trains, running at up to 120 km per hour. CR had tried the WCAM2 and WCAM2P units but found them usable only with speed restrictions. Some WCAM2P units had only air brakes. With the WCAM2 locos, new operation was possible with up to 3-4 units. All of the WCAM2 locos were originally leased to IR, ownership remaining with BHEL, the manufacturers. The Indian locomotive class WCAM3 is a class of dual-power AC-DC series locomotives used in the Indian Railways system. They are the third locomotives from the WCAM class. They were specifically designed for use by Central Railways in the Ghat section towards Nashik and Pune. So this was the end of the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, please like and share. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe my channel. Please send me your feedback in the comments section. Thank you.